Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for trying to log in to see this webinar live. I am so sorry that technology has proven a little bit tricky today, and I wasn't able to have any of you here. But I hope you will enjoy this recorded version. So hello, everyone. This is the webinar on ADHD from a natural perspective. So first, a little bit about myself. My name is Caroline Kennedy, and I've got a Bachelor of Health Science where I majored in naturopathy. So the Bachelor of Health Science was a 4-year science degree. And although I work with herbs and nutrients, I always work with science. So all my treatments are based in science or empirical data, which means that things have been tried for a very long time and they are sure to work. But most of what I do is based in science. So I read a lot of scientific papers. It's one of my favorite things to do. I should also say that this is a special interest of mine because I've got ADHD and I was quite newly diagnosed. I was also diagnosed with autism. Oh, I've got someone online. How exciting. Hi. Just explaining who I am and where I'm coming from. So I've got a diagnosis of both ADHD and autism. So this subject is very close to my heart and it is a bit of a special interest. So when I went through this webinar content with my mentor, he said, well, this is a perfect example of ADHD as an info dump. So yes, that's what we've got in front of us. I hope you will enjoy it. So firstly, we're all on the same page in terms of what ADHD actually means to our brains, so some pathophysiology. I just want to go through a little bit because it's important for us to know that we're on the same page, and also the webinar will make more sense if you have this information fresh in mind. So we don't know the exact pathophysiology of ADHD. It's quite complex and it's not completely understood yet. But we know it's a complex genetic disorder where an imbalance of neurotransmitters lead to poor attention, distractibility, poor organization, poor inhibition of behaviors, and the list goes on. And the real imbalance of neurotransmitters are between norepinephrine, and dopamine, but serotonin is also involved. And what they've found is in ADHDers, we actually have fewer dopamine receptors. We also have a poor dopamine production, and we're also not making enough norepinephrine. But also mechanically in the brain, physiologically, we have a reduced rewards pathway, and there are developments in the frontal lobe which are different to a neurotypical person. And with the prefrontal cortex, we have a reduced function. So, and mostly because of the balance of the neurotransmitters is so poor. And this is where the executive function is based. We also have the inhibition for inappropriate behaviors in our prefrontal cortex. So whilst some of the important brain pathways are working normally, we've got some that are not fully active. And there is some discussion around these just not being developed properly when we're either in fetal development or when we're really young children, and we don't know why. So there's some theories around why this happens. And we also know that a chronic deficit of serotonin in the junctions where the nerves meet can also lead to symptoms of ADHD. And there's been some investigations that suggest that actually serotonin might regulate some of the behaviors of hyperactivity and impulsivity that we see in ADHD. There's a really great website that I put on there that describes the neurobiology of ADHD really well. So I found this quote on ADHD and I thought it was really good because it just completely encompasses all the problems that we have. So people with ADHD suffer from overload That is, they have heightened awareness of incoming stimuli, particularly sight, sound, and touch. They are so bombarded by the normal stimuli in their environment that they cannot filter out the background noise, and they have trouble focusing or concentrating on a problem or task. Because of their inability to focus, those with ADHD have trouble completing what they start. They have difficulties with making plans and even more difficulty in carrying out plans in an orderly fashion. And I thought, wow, that's really insightful. So that's Bloom et al. That wrote an article on attention deficit hyperactive disorder and reward deficiency syndrome in the Neuropsychiatric Disease Treatment Journal. So yeah, it's a well-informed group of people. All right, so now let's jump a little bit because we've got a lot of content to get through. But so why do the medications work? Because one thing that's really important to note is that I only work next to medications if you want to, but I will never tell you to stop medications. In fact, I actually take ADHD medication myself, not every day, but for the days that I need it, when I want to focus on something. There is nothing natural that can create that level of clarity in my mind. And I've tried a lot of things. There are ways of supporting, of course, that help, which is what we're going to go through now. But so why do the medications work? Well, the medications quite simply stops the dopamine and the noradrenaline or norepinephrine as they stop it from being reduced. So what does that mean? It basically means that they don't get taken back into the neurons. So what happens in the brain, we've got all these neurons like long threads that connect to each other, and in the junctions between, we release neurotransmitters that tell the little tale of what's going on to the next neuron, and then so on and so forth. Well, when that dopamine is released, it's then taken up by the next neuron, and there's no dopamine left to provide the message or messaging. And that's what the medication does. It stops that dopamine to be taken up by the next neuron, and it can keep telling the same message over and over again, which means that we can basically get more bang for a little bit of buck of dopamine. But so it does the same with noradrenaline or norepinephrine. It's the same thing. It's two words for the same thing. So that's when, if we get to a point where we're taking quite a high dose of a medication, we can find that we get anxiety or insomnia or stress. That when we're feeling hyper, we're having too much medication. So and the other medications to work together, because as we said earlier, serotonin is also an issue in ADHD. Antidepressants can actually be taken next to the stimulants, and this can be very effective. But again, all of these things can also be supported by natural medicine. So now, one thing that I found in my clients here in clinic is that the medicine stops working, or it doesn't stop working, but it doesn't work as well. So that's what happens when we kind of run out of the building blocks of making our dopamine. So everything that we make in our body, we need amino acids and we need cofactors such as vitamins and minerals. So maybe you started on a 5 milligrams of dexamphetamines, for example, and then you find yourself moving up and up and up through the doses to receive the same effect. And some of that's not going to be negated by natural medicine. But what you can do, if you find that one day, and I've had a few clients like this, they come in and they go, I'm really stressed out. I'm feeling all the side effects from my medication, i.e. from that when we're reusing the norepinephrine, but I'm not feeling any of the benefits. And that's when we need to top up with those targeted amino acids, minerals, and vitamins. So that's one of the key things that I can do for you in clinic if you want to take your medication. There are a lot of other things too. The webinar is not over. Let's talk about, and let's just quickly hit on the adrenals and burnout. So in the community, a lot of people talk a lot about burnout and ADHD burnout. So what is that? Well, it's basically when we feel like we get so tired that we just lie down in a puddle on the sofa and we can't do anything else. We might even feel like a little bit foggy in the brain. Even when we take our medication, we've gone past the stage of feeling wired of the medication, and now we're just feeling nothing's happening. We're taking the same dose, or we're taking the highest dose of the medication. We're not feeling clarity, and we're not even getting any energy from it. So what's happened then? Well, basically we've got, on top of our kidneys, we've got 2 adrenal glands. And in that adrenal gland, in the adrenal medulla, we create 2 hormones. We create adrenaline and noradrenaline. And noradrenaline is the one that's important in ADHD, but adrenaline obviously is for the short-term kind of kick when you've got to run somewhere or something scary happens. But basically what happens is that there's only so much we can make. There's quite small organs, and we have a little bit of extra in there. But if we keep working harder and harder and harder, telling them, taking more and more medication, and we're using more and more noradrenaline every day, but we're not getting that dopamine hit. So these things kind of often go hand in hand. So first the medicine's not quite working, and then we're taking more and more, and we're feeling more and more stressed, but we're not getting the clarity because we're not making dopamine. We basically use up the stored hormones in this adrenal gland, and then the body can't basically keep up, and that's when we feel like we hit bottom. So the little bit of noradrenaline that we make is instantly used up. So in a healthy person, we've got a bit of stored noradrenaline in our adrenal gland, and it kind of just gets excreted as we need it. But if we've used too much of it, the body just can't keep up. We don't have any storage left. So the body keeps making it, but it's just being used up straight away. So the next thing I want to talk about is food. So I'm jumping a little bit, but there's so much that I want to talk about, and this is my info dump. So ADHD and food. So what do we love about food? Well, dopamine is the best spice, right? So if you eat some delicious foods and you feel good and you feel that dopamine kicking in and it's all a bit groovy, that's great. But is it? So I'm same with serotonin foods, like the carbs and the salty, crunchy chips. Great, stimulates dopamine and serotonin short term. But long term, what's the long-term effect of food? Well, obviously, it's not healthy eating, salty, crunchy chips every day. We need to eat a whole food diet. We need to have energy throughout the day. And the same thing if you maybe you've added a little bit of weight on because you've been enjoying, the sweet, sugary foods, all of those things that makes you feel good instantly. They make you feel good because they trigger dopamine and serotonin in the body. All right, so you've put some weight on, you go, I'm going to do like a keto diet or a paleo diet, and I'm going to lose some weight. And you do that for a while, and you're still not feeling great. And you go, what's wrong with me? You look around, and everyone else is losing weight, and they're feeling great, and you've got all these photos on Instagram about how amazing people feel. Well, these diets take away quite a lot of the different foods in our diet. They're very restrictive. And when we eat for ADHD, we need to have a broader diet as possible because we need to get those nutrients we talked about earlier, the cofactors, the vitamins, the minerals, and the amino acids. We can't take whole food groups out. It's a disaster. I tried keto a couple of years ago, and I've never been so low in my life. It just doesn't work. We can't make any neurotransmitters all of a sudden. So what about coffee and alcohol? Well, coffee, we have a funny relationship with a lot. Some people can't have it at all, but the people that do love coffee, that have ADHD, it's probably because it stimulates both dopamine and norepinephrine. So it's like a little shot of natural medicine. So you can self-medicate with coffee for quite a long time if you've got ADHD. Alcohol, look, it's great fun, but so alcohol has quite a big impact on your intestines, and it will reduce the amount of nutrients that you can absorb in your gut. And it will if you drink a lot often, it will put a heavy, obviously, load on your liver, and it will cause inflammation in your gut, and you'll have a reduced uptake of those vital nutrients that you need to build your neurotransmitters. Now with blood sugar levels, and because sugar kicks are such an easy dopamine kick, we need to consider that noradrenaline actually controls our blood sugar. So noradrenaline, which we're already really bad at making and reusing, is the one that makes sure that we balance our blood sugar levels. It stimulates your insulin release and so forth. So if we're constantly eating sugar and doing this, we're wreaking havoc with a hormone, noradrenaline, that we're already having a problem with. So you can see how food is something that we'll reach for to feel good, but long term, it will actually do more harm than good. So yes, sorry, here was my summary slide on that. We run out of the building blocks. So basically, when we're stressed, we use up certain vitamins and minerals much quicker. And these are needed to regulate our emotions. So if we run out, we're more susceptible to further stress and anxieties. So basically, we need all those minerals and vitamins as cofactors. We want to make sure that we avoid nutrient deficiencies. So obviously, that's where I come in. I can help you guys put together a meal plans and discuss menus that will suit your lifestyle. So next step in this process is to consider. Hi, Daryl. Hi, Daryl, welcome. All right, so the next thing to consider is the gut-brain axis. So the gut-brain axis is important. We tie that in with the food that we're eating. Is if we're eating food that is, or drinking a lot of alcohol that causes an inflammation in our gut, then that will actually impact how our brain works as well. So in the gut, we've got all these cells in the wall called enterocytes, and the food that we process in the gut, each has to pass through one of these cells and then be broken down in the cell to little packages that can actually be sent around our bloodstream and used in our body. Now, in between these cells are little gaps, little gap junctions, and they're very specific. They're very specific size because only very specifically sized and modulated molecules can go into our bloodstream. But what happens when we eat food that's inflammatory to our gut, as you can see here, they've said abnormal gut function, and they talk about gut permeability. So basically, you get increased levels of proteins and lipids and inflammatory cells that actually sneak past in between those cells, and they get carried away with the blood. And what happens is that they meet another similar barrier that we have up in our brain, and the same thing happens there. So we get actually inflammation in the brain barrier, and we actually get an inflamed brain, and we get things into our brain that we shouldn't have there. So it's called leaky brain. Oops, that's the wrong button to press. Why am I not pressing that button? Here we go. Oh, no, there we go. So it's called leaky brain. Here we go. It's another picture that I've got. So basically, you see the little inflamed gut cells there, intestinal cells, the enterocytes, and they lead, when that happens, you get an inflammation. You also get reduced serotonin production, because most of our serotonin is actually made in our intestines. And when you get that imbalance of serotonin, your dopamine's affected, and your mood becomes disordered, and your ADHD is impacted. And this is also called leaky brain. It's a new concept because we've only just started realizing. We thought our brains were completely protected with the blood-brain barrier and that nothing could get through there. But what we're finding is actually we can get inflammation, and that's the gut-brain axis. It's the cause of that. What I've also found is that celiac disease is actually overrepresented in ADHD. Not saying everyone has it, but it's an interesting correlation. So as a naturopath, you've probably heard, oh, naturopaths always talk about not eating gluten and dairy. Well, unfortunately, the other thing that gluten does is that in the gut is that it stimulates zonulin. It's a hormone that decides how big those gaps are between the enterocytes. And that will make it more permeable as well. And then if you get free gluten and casein proteins into the blood, that will also stimulate opioid receptors, and that's what gives you that foggy brain. So if you get really tired and sort of just feel like you can't really think and it's just hard to concentrate, that can actually be what you eat. It could be gluten and dairy. Not saying everyone needs to stop it, but it's definitely something worth looking at. All right, so ADHD and omega-3. Let's just have a look at the time. All right, so ADHD and omega-3. So omega-3 is one of those things that's really important in neural development. So when you're pregnant, that is one of the key nutrients that any doctor will tell you to make sure that you have a lot of, because we know that omega-3 is important in neural development. And what they've also found is that it actually has a function with the dopamine and the serotonin in the brain, and that children with ADHD actually has a significantly lower concentration in the blood of omega-3. So there's the direct correlation between omega-3 and ADHD. And I guess it's because our neural network is just not working as well. So we need more of the omega-3s. And omega-6 is another one as well, which comes in evening primrose oil. So not the bad omega-3, which is the one that's pro-inflammatory, which causes inflammation. But there is another omega-3 that's actually anti-inflammatory, and that's the one that we want to take in ADHD. I don't know why it keeps doing that. All right, so what about exercise and dopamine? So we all feel great when we exercise, but I want to tie this back to our adrenals and say that, yes, it's great if you can do high intensity training, fantastic. Just be aware and make sure that you see what your body is doing when you're doing that. And if you've had a burnout, maybe consider doing slower exercises, because the reason high intensity training works so well is because it uses up that adrenaline, the noradrenaline and the adrenaline from your adrenals, like we were talking about earlier, and can contribute to a burnout. So if you're, training for something, you're training really hard, and then you feel like the next day you can barely think a thought straight through and you can't get off the couch for 3 days, maybe dial it back. Maybe start doing some weights, maybe some slow movements such as yoga and Pilates. I love weights personally because it still gets me, makes me feel like I'm really strong and like I'm building myself up. But high intensity training can be detrimental for someone with ADHD. But in general, exercise, walking is great. It regulates all your hormones and obviously provides that nice natural dopamine hit. So ties nicely into the next thing that I wanted to talk about today, which is the mind-body techniques. So I said walking is great. Walking is fantastic. Meditation, if that is possible, but remember that meditation doesn't have to mean that you completely empty your mind, because that can be really difficult for us. So I teach a meditation that is suitable for an ADHD brain, where it's not necessary to just sit and empty your mind, because it's just torture. But finding ways to meditate with a busy mind is possible. Spending time in nature can almost be like meditating. Camping, seeing friends, doing your favorite arts and crafts is something that can also calm you down and also provide a dopamine hit. I know that's something that we sometimes have a problem with, that we discuss in the community, that we gotta find another project and then we buy all the things for that project and then we get over it and we start the new project. So within reason, as long as it provides joy, we have to not be too hard on ourselves. I think one of the most important things when it comes to mind and body techniques is to accept who we are and accept our limitations, but also the incredible powers that we have. The fact that we can think about several different things at once can be an incredible resource in the right environment, which leads me to the last point here, that choosing the right line of work can be a real mind-body technique. Finding something that you enjoy that allows your brain to think about and do different things and keeps you interested. So I work as a naturopath, but I also work as a disability support worker, where I go out to people's homes and help them cook food, or I take them to appointments, and I do things with them. And I love that work. I love sitting here talking one-on-one with someone and doing my research, but I also love being out and about. So I get to do both. So that's worked really well for me, how I've set that up. Now, this is another interesting one that I'm really personally very excited about, because it's made such a massive difference to me. It's called the polyvagal theory. So the vagus nerve is the biggest nerve in the human body, and it goes all the way up from the brain. And it basically touches every organ in our abdomens. And the way it works in a kind of simplistic way is that it stimulates the rest and digest. I'm sure you have all heard of fight and flight, which is that whole norepinephrine, running, adrenaline, high intensity training, really go, 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 excited, stressed. That's fight and flight. But then on the reverse, we've got rest and digest. And we need to be in both. Actually, we need mostly to be in rest and digest. And that is something that us ADHDers find really difficult, right? We're mostly just getting on with things. So rest and digest is when the body can rest and digest, obviously, but basically we can sleep properly. And we can also, it's very important for those nutrients to be absorbed properly and to be used up properly, and so we can make all those neurotransmitters and deal with all our stress. So we need to digest properly. So we need blood flow basically to our intestines. So the vagus nerve basically stimulates rest and digest. So that's why it touches all of those organs. So when we're in fight and flight, we get blood out to our extremities so we can run really fast away from that threat. That's the kind of evolutionary reason to why we have fight and flight. In rest and digest, all the blood goes into the abdomen and we get a slower heartbeat. We get lots of blood in our abdomen to digest the food, and we get good breathing, and our heart rate and blood pressure goes down, and we get good urinary output. Now, what the polyvagal theory says is that when you spend too much time in fight and flight, you basically, your body kind of forgets how to get back into rest and digest. It's like having any muscle that you're not using a lot. Or, I mean, even think about it, neurons, when you do one thing a lot, you get really good at that, but you forget the other thing you did a few years ago that you're not really doing anymore. It's because you're practicing something. And it's the same with using these two parts of the nervous system. They're called autonomic nervous systems because they're autonomic. They're working on their own. And what we want to do in the polyvagal theory is that we want to stimulate the vagus nerve and put ourselves into rest and digest. So I did this for 30 minutes every night before going to sleep. And most of the times in the first 6 months, I fell asleep doing this. So it's basically you get a little TENS machine, and I can help you organize this. Get a little TENS machine with a little clip, and you basically have like a little electric stimulation. And the reason it's in your ear is because that's the only place where your vagus nerve is actually on the surface of the body and where you can actually access it. And you stimulate your vagus nerve, and it is incredible. For me, it changed my life. It really did. And this is not even part of, my nutrients and herbs and things that I do, but I am absolutely passionate about this. It helped me start sleeping properly, not only sleeping, falling asleep and staying asleep, but actually feeling refreshed when I woke up, which had been quite a few years for me. So I used it every night for a year, and then I stopped for a while and I've just started again. And it's just, now it doesn't have such a huge impact on me anymore, but it does still help me sleep really well. So yes, I can't recommend the vagus nerve enough. All right. And just quickly, toxic exposure. This is a whole other subject, and I could hold a whole webinar on this, but this is kind of a little bit about why we end up with ADHD at all. And the toxic exposure is so in fetal development, or when we're in early childhood, when our brain is still developing. So this could be, and that could be some of these toxins still in our body and could stop us from effectively making the neurotransmitters as much as we could. So I'm not saying that I can cure ADHD, because no one can. It's a structural problem, but reducing some of this toxic load can allow the neurotransmitter production to increase. So for example, mercury and zinc, right? So we have mercury in fish. So most of us have been exposed to mercury, and mercury is very toxic in the bloodstream. So the body stores it quite quickly. And mercury has the same outer shell as in the atom as zinc. Zinc is one of the key minerals for neurotransmitters. So, but because mercury is heavier, it kind of gets lodged in when we need to put zinc. And unless we get rid of the mercury, basically we can't utilize the zinc, and the zinc is what makes the neurotransmitters. So I don't know if that explains, it's very, very short snippet of a massive subject. All right, but yeah, I will definitely have another webinar more specifically on that. So, oops. Info dumping done. Where is it? There, info dumping done. So I'm really sorry if you feel overwhelmed with the amount of information. This was a bit of an info dump for me. I do love research, and this subject is near and dear to my heart and my brain. But yeah, in summary, ADHD is very complex. And whilst the medications can work wonders for most people, there is a lot we can do to support mental well-being by choosing the right diet and getting some targeted nutrients on board. So everyone is different, and your nutritional needs will be different. So I'm not going to recommend any supplements today, and I will never do that in a public forum, because what the guy next to you is taking might not work for you. And you need to sit down with a health professional and work out your journey to where you are today, because there are so many different aspects to why your health is the way it is today. Someone will be suffering depression next to their ADHD, someone else anxiety, someone will be suffering migraines, another person will have IBS, and we all need to do different things to sort that out. I hope that you've enjoyed today, and I'll ask my Anif and Daryl if you'd like to ask any questions. We've got a few minutes left. All right, well, I'll thank you both for coming. I will be sending out a recording of this, or a link to the recording rather. I'll probably put it up on YouTube. And yeah, thank you so much, and have a great rest of your Wednesday. Thank you. Bye.